It was in 1940s when Philip Larkin started writing poetry. Before that, another not that significant information about Philip Larkin is that he worked as a librarian during his lifetime. He was not a teacher of English literature or a lecturer or a professor of English literature, but he was a librarian. So having a job of a librarian, he had ample time to read and perhaps to write. So it was in 1940s that Philip Larkin would begin writing. And he experienced great failures in his initial stage of writing. Philip Larkin wanted to write novels and he wanted to develop his literary career as a novelist. So he would publish his first novel titled as Jill in 1946. And this particular novel called Jill did not receive great appreciation from amongst the people. So eventually in 1947, he came up with another novel, and this time this novel was called as A Girl in Winter. Now again, even this novel did not receive great appreciation. Now these were two great failures of Philip Larkin, and when he saw that he was not achieving the desired results by writing novels, so he turned to poetry. In 1945, Philip Larkin published his first collection of poetry titled as The North Ship. Now again, this publication did not receive great reviews, and his writing career, his literary career, the graph of his writing career would be dipping down as he did not experience great success. So that was the first phase of the writing of Philip Larkin, wherein he did not get or achieve what perhaps he would have wished out of his writing. So then came 1950s. So the decade of 1950s sees an exceedingly great increase in the fame of Philip Larkin. In 1955, Philip Larkin publishes the collection of his poetry called The Less Deceived. And another change that you will see in Philip Larkin after 1950s is that he would devote most of his time to writing poetry rather than writing novels, because the failures of two novels that he published in 1946 and 47 led him to give up writing a novel, and he took poetry as his our important tool, and he became very famous poet when he started writing poetry. So first success of his was The Less Deceived, a collection of poetry which was published in 1955. Though it did not make him very famous, but that was the beginning of making of a great poet named as Philip Larkin. So the greatest break in the literary career of Philip Larkin came in 1964 with the publication of his poetry called as the Whitson's Wedding. And the Whitsun Weddings in 1964 brought great fame to Philip Larkin. And it was after the publication of this collection that in 1965, Philip Larkin ended up winning the Queen's Gold Medal Award for Poetry. Eventually, in 1966, The North Ship, which was published in 1945, was reissued. And the reissue of The North Ship became very famous, because up to this point, from 1955 to 1966, Philip Larkin had become a very renowned poet, a very important poet, a national poet, a poet of reckoning. Therefore, the republication or reissuing of The North Ship also gained great success. It was in 1974, almost a decade later, that Philip Larkin published his most successful collection of poetry called as High Windows. This collection of poetry made, Philip Larkin a national poet, a national monument, one of the greatest living legend, one of the greatest poets. It was through this collection called High Windows that Philip Larkin rose to a great fame. And one of his friends and movement poet called as Donald Davy wrote about Philip Larkin that he was the unofficial Poet Laureate of England in post 1945 era. Now that was the famousness of Philip Larkin as a poet after 1950s, 1955 the Less Deceived, 1964 the Whitson's Wedding, 1966 the North Ship reissued, and 1974 High Windows. Now these were some of the most successful collections of poetry published by Philip Larkin. Philip Larkin, besides writing unsuccessful novels and successful poetry, also wrote few works of prose. And the noteworthy prose writing of Philip Larkin include a book on all that jazz, which was published in 1970, required writings which were published in 1983. Now, amongst these two, all that jazz would be important, because jazz was an important aspect of the life of Philip Larkin and also his writings. Now that was the literary career of Philip Larkin. It began in the decade of 1940s. It took off in 1950s and became very famous in 1970s. Though after 1970s, Philip Larkin didn't write. He was a person who was not who was not used to making himself to public. He believed in privacy, he lived in private life, and after the death of his parents, he went into solitary kind of a life, and which created a lot of troubles for him. He went into depression also and suffered with many problems towards the end of his life, and it was eventually in 1985 that Philip Larkin died. That was about the literary life of Philip Larkin. Now we would deal with another aspect of Philip Larkin in this lecture, and that would be, we would discuss few characteristic features of Philip Larkin. So one of the important characteristic feature of Philip Larkin would be, or Philip Larkin as a poet, would be the movement. He is considered as the most influential movement poet besides Kingsley Amis. What is movement? Now this movement is a literary movement of a group of poets who wrote after 1950s against the ideals of modernism, and they wanted to incorporate those things in poetry and life which were given up by the modernist movement. I'll not deal in this particular lecture in detail with the movement. We will come up with another lecture regarding Philip Larkin as a movement poet, wherein we will deal in detail the movement, we will deal the characteristic of movement and Philip Larkin as a movement poet. The other important aspect of Philip Larkin's literary life was that he was anti-modernist. He did not like the modernist ideals. Now you remember, the modernist was a movement which flourished in England during 1920s and early 30s. And even it began after World War I, or in 1910s you will also see some elements of modernism in England. But Philip Larkin was anti-modernist, and he once remarked about modernism: "This is my essential criticism of modernism. Whether perpetrated by Parker, Pound or Picasso, it helps us neither to enjoy nor endure." Now these were the remarks or comments of Philip Larkin about modernism. So he was an anti-modernist. You will find the elements of anti-modernism in his poetry also. Another important aspect of his poetry was jazz. Now jazz was a genre in music, and it was relatively new thing back then. And Philip Larkin was highly impressed by jazz. And he practiced jazz in his real life also. He recorded few songs during his life. And Kingsley Amis was also highly impressed by jazz. Philip Larkin wrote a non-fiction work on jazz titled as All That Jazz, and he said about jazz that jazz is the closest description of the unconscious we have. That was the place that jazz had in the life of, or in the literary life of Philip Larkin. Now again, as I said, that this is the lecture which is dedicated to the literary life of Philip Larkin, so we won't be going into much of a detail about the movement, about anti-modernism or about jazz thing. Just for you to know that Philip Larkin was a movement poet, he was an anti-modernist, and he was highly influenced by jazz movement. That was about Philip Larkin. That was about the literary life of Philip Larkin. And that is all we have at your academy today. I hope that this lecture was helpful for you. Don't forget to share, comment, like and subscribe your academy, and don't forget to browse through your academy. At your academy we have great collection of lectures on different poets, on theory, on criticism, on plays, on novels. You can visit the page of your academy and browse through lectures. You might find many interesting things regarding literature you perhaps might be looking for. Thank you for watching.